and welcome back to Classic Album Week on Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records like a big nerd and talk about why I love them. Today, I have a big cut on the underside of my tongue, and I'm finding it difficult to speak, but I will give this my very best, because I am so excited about this week's episode. I have been wanting to cover this album for a very long time, and I say that like someone external is stopping me from doing so. I set the schedule, but here we are! Typically, the material for Classic Album Week is determined by poll, but as this month is my birthday month, I have decided to override the poll and to cover last month's runner-up, which just so happens to be an album which proved curative during a formative period of my youth. More on that later in the episode. This is an album that both Pitchfork and Rolling Stone named one of the greatest of the 80s. One of the 100 greatest of the 80s, even. It is one of the 1001 albums that you must hear before you die, according to this guy. And it's achieved a perfect score on AllMusic, Q, Record Collector, the Encyclopedia of Popular Music, and Rolling Stone's Album Guide. Today's album is XTC's 9th studio album. It's entitled Skylarking. It was released in 1986, and it sounds like this.
That's really super, super girl. Darling, don't you ever stop to wonder. I can't earn enough for us. Big day. Don't need another satellite. And it's no place like home. It's empty skin. We made you. Don't want to die like you. Change must begin.
Now, are we getting ahead of ourselves, though? I haven't even told you who these guys are. Who is XTC? Well, XTC is a band that was formed in 1972, fronted by singer and guitarist Andy Partridge and bassist Colin Moulding. They gained some degree of popularity during the punk and new wave boom in the UK. The success that they achieved was occasional and moderate, but they did have a sizable cult listenership, as all of us in this particular room of the internet are no doubt aware. Their sound started jagged and angular, but over the course of the 1980s, those edges smoothed, and their music trended more elaborate, with tasting notes of psychedelic.
Welcome to reality.
By early 1986, the executives, suits, at their record label, which happened to be Virgin, threatened to drop them if they didn't move at least 70,000 units of their next album, which I think is rude, but that's capitalism for you. Although Andy had acted as the informal producer for a lot of their previous album projects, the label didn't explicitly allow for bands to self-produce, so it was decided that Todd Rundgren would take on the role formally for this next project. This was in part because he had a reputation for taking problem projects and turning them out to schedule and within budget, which, again, was important to the capitalists.
The producers were losing control of the process. Subsequently, the records were starting to sell less and less. And the problem with XTC was that when Andy got stage fright and they stopped touring, their entire musical life took place in the studio. And so, in one sense, they never wanted records to be finished because that meant that the music stopped after that. But especially as they would get to the mixing process, if you give people too much time to do it, they lose perspective.
Yeah.
He was also American. I think you'll find he still is American, which the label execs, the men in suits, thought would actually help out the band, because they were of the opinion that the Englishness of XTC was really hampering their sales. The band's lead guitarist, Dave Gregory, had been a huge fan of Todd Rundgren's album Hermit of Mink Hollow.
Can we still be friends?
Me Too. And Colin Moulding was converted when he heard I Saw the Light. I totally missed the opportunity to say that he saw the light upon hearing I Saw the Light. Anyway, that song is off Something Anything, which is also a great album of Todd Rundgren's. Andy Partridge took a lot more convincing, but he eventually relented when he found out that Todd had produced the New York Dolls' eponymous 1973 album. And that was sort of the high point of their relationship, because they were not pals. Andy and Todd. Famously, they did not get on. Andy was turned off immediately when he found out that Todd had taken the 20-something demos that the band had sent and informed them that it was going to be a concept album, and had decided on the sequencing of the entire album before they'd even hit record on anything. In Andy's words, quote, "You hadn't spoken to the bloke for 3 minutes and he'd already been hacking and throwing your work in the bin." He adds that Todd's musical tastes were, quote, "completely contradictory to mine," and called him so bloody sarcastic. I had another quote that I wanted to read. Let me locate my cell phone. Andy says that he would ask him how he was going to do his vocals. Quote, "You would stand in front of the mic and do one run through to clear your throat. And he'd say, 'That was crap. I'll come down. I'll record me singing it. And you can have me in your headphones to sing along to.' Or, quote, 'You can dig around with the track for a few hours your way if you like. I'm going up to my house. When you find out it doesn't work your way, give me a call and we'll record it my way.'" So I think you've got two mammoth egos just operating in competition with each other. Todd, for his part, rather flatly refutes. "There was a moment Andy said he wanted to cleave my head in half with an axe, but there was never anything physical." Good, I guess. Dave and Gregory got along just fine with Todd. For what it's worth, even if he was a total asshat, although I do think the asshattery was reserved specifically for Andy, I'm of the opinion that Todd Rundgren did the job that he was hired to do. He took a batch of exceptionally good songs and correctly assessed that when taken as a group, they formed a concept. The album songs cover, in his words, more quotes, so many quotes today, but I think they're tasteful, important quotes. "Significant milestones, birth, young love, family, labor, illness, death, sprinkled with moments of wonderment." He identified these magical elements of the songs and encouraged them to blossom. Having said that, I think that Andy would probably receive some petty satisfaction in knowing that both Skylarking and Todd's album Something Anything have had places on the classic album poll for Vinyl Friday. XTC has gotten in first. Or maybe that's my ego getting a little bit too big for its boots. Here's my relationship to this album. In my last year of high school, I suffered a cornucopia of heartbreaks. In retrospect, I sort of see that year as the one where I lost my childhood, because I learned to hurt in ways that I could not have conceived possible prior. By the end of the year, I was in a state of dark, persistent despair. Poor baby me. And someone who was very dear to me at the time had been ranting for ages about this band called XTC and their album Skylarking, blah, blah, blah. So when this showed up in the bargain bin of my local, I of course nabbed it. It's in terrible shape. It's very scratchy and actually sounds quite horrible to listen to now, but I wasn't terribly fussed about that kind of thing as a 16-year-old collector of vinyl. I dropped the needle, and at a very specific moment on the opening track, Summer's Cauldron, the clouds very momentarily lifted, and I felt like maybe it was all going to be okay. This was all happening at the beginning of spring, so ironically, the track Summer's Cauldron actually evokes in me very vernal feelings of rebirth and starting over from scratch and those sorts of things. Again, at this very specific point in the song. So let's start talking about that song, and when we get to that point, that moment, I'll point it out to you. Summer's Cauldron has a very long intro. It's comprised of sound effects, and we've got crickets, birds, and this very wobbly organ. The thing that I really enjoy about albums as a format, they're in no hurry. You know, we can take a minute to open the track if we want. Music that's built for things like short-form videos, on the other hand, tend to be mostly chorus, and there is no fanfare, no foreplay, if you will. And sometimes as listeners, that's what we need. This song has plenty of it. And with each of those things added gradually, it feels like you are slipping into this pool of bliss, a cauldron, I suppose. Andy's voice comes in.
Drowning here in summer's cauldron.
We've got some buzzing bee sound effects. He has like a really wacky, goofy voice. It's kind of wobbly, but in spite of that, he wields it with such confidence. It's an interesting dichotomy. Tonally, his voice feels uncertain, but there's something about the way that he delivers it that makes it feel much steadier than it is technically. It's also interesting because the band actually pulled a bit of a Sgt. Pepper and became a studio band because Andy was an incredibly anxious live performer and had a huge panic attack. Basically announced to everyone, we're not doing this anymore, we are a studio band now. I'm glad he found his place in the studio and that he was able to bring so much vivacity and life, I suppose that is the same thing, energy, life force to his vocal performance. So we get a couple of lines there, and then there's this jangly, ringy, what sounds like a 12-string guitar. I should probably check that. The record itself may actually tell me. What wisdom do you hold for me, liner notes? The answer is, I don't know, but it sounds like a 12-string to me. It heralds in the next part of the verse.
Please don't pull me out.
It almost takes the place of the cymbals on the drums. It's very high frequency. It's a truly beautiful sound. Ethereal, almost. And that pulls the drum and the bass into the mix. It's so good. Typically for XTC, the bass part is very creative. But I'm not the person to talk to you about that. Bass correspondent, please! So this bass line is composed of mostly scales and syncopations. There are these flurries of busyness and then of quiet, total silence, bass. Here's what's happening in the verse. The drums are also kind of unusual and not what you would necessarily expect. Hello, Vinyl Friday family! It's me, your drum correspondent. When the drums come in the verse, they sound enormous. And I think the reason for that is that where you might usually have a kick and snare sort of a combo, in this case, the snare is being replaced with the tom. And the tom is a much louder and longer sustaining sound, as opposed to this. And this is what it sounds like in context. It just feels like nobody in the band is ever phoning it in. There was plenty of space for the bass and the drums to be doing things that were far more conventional, but no, they chose to make it their own in an incredibly inimitable way. Beautiful. The lyrics are very nature-focused. Drowning here in summer's cauldron under mats of flower lava, please don't pull me out. This is how I would want to go. So we are submerged in this pool of natural, very organic bliss. The kind you would buy at Whole Foods. You might have a listen to these chords and think, oh yeah, that's pretty standard, that's nothing special, but I would make the argument that they are actually pretty special, and I can think of somebody else who would too. Hi everyone! As a chord girly, XTC is one of my favorite bands for exciting and interesting chords. And I do have to say, this is not one of their most experimental songs. This song has lovely chords nonetheless, because XTC is a band that goes, we could play E, or we could add a whole lot of things to it and turn what you think is an E into something entirely different. You come to join me at the piano? Okay. This song is a perfect example of that. So it sounds like it's in E major, the verse. Right? We all know that chord. E major. Easy. But then they add to that a bass line, which implies this note. And that makes it that, as opposed to that. And then we've got our warbly organ thing, which I think Andy Partridge said reminded him of Blue Jay Way by the Beatles. Which he liked, because he has ears. And that is doing this. So suddenly we've gone from an E major chord to something more like this. That's way more interesting. Drowning here in summer's cauldron, under mats of flower lava. And then we do a, please don't pull me out, this is how I would want to go. And we're back to this. So that's just straight out the gate. We're doing something that sounds familiar, but in fact is not. It's what they excel at. After we repeat that sequence, we arrive at this magical antidepressant part of the song. It sounds like this.
When Miss Moon lays down.
It's a total tonal shift. We have new instruments. There's a piano now. The harmonic level of the song, so what's establishing the chord of the song, was very ringing acoustic in the verse section. But here we have this bright, clean, clear piano that's carrying that harmonic layer. And it is playing these just heart-opening chords. Now the verse, I would say, has a curious, maybe mischievous feel to it. The chorus feels like breathing fresh air for the first time in a long time. And that's because we've changed key from here to B. Doesn't that feel good? Not only that, the B major, straight B major, is followed up with this. God, that's a pretty chord. When Miss Moon lays down. Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding just had such a healthy respect for the significance of note choice. Love their work. At the same time the bass is opening up, it goes from playing these very gappy, spacey lines to something much broader, to more of a walking feel. It's a similar thing. It's scales and syncopation again, but the note choice is impeccable and it soars. It rises into the higher reaches of the bass's range. Sort of. Not quite the highest, but moderately high, you know, for a bass instrument. Sometimes it lands on the beat, like when he sings, like a bag and brandy in this big bronze cup. It lines up with the melody, ba, 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 ba. But there are so many other moments where it anticipates the beat or sits just behind it, like when he sings When Miss Moon Lays Down. Or, me I'm found floating round and round. Just little syncopations like that, that just lovely bass delights. There is so much to love in everything that Colin Moulding does. So be grateful to live in a universe with Colin Moulding, right? Yeah. There's something about the delivery of this chorus, all of the instruments, the vocals, the lyrics, everything, the chords, that just make you feel like it's going to be okay, that everything is going to be okay. There's a kind of sublime bliss to it, if that makes sense. Let's listen to it again.
When Miss Moon lays down.
It was, I listened back to that and I relived that moment when I was 16 or 17, and just the immense relief that you feel when you've been seeing black for weeks and weeks on end and suddenly you can see in color again. Even if it's only for a little moment, it's just this reminder that that can happen. That you're not going to be singing monochromatically forever.
When Miss Moon is down.
And that, I think, is a big part of what helped to get me out of it. It was the reminder that things can be nice. And it's all in those two chords.
And Susan stands up.
The chorus ends in this kind of like weird, cramped, diminished chord place.
Like a bug in brandy, this big one's caught.
And then we open up again.
Coming here and summer's cold.
And we're back into the verse. Second verse introduces some off-kilter harmony. The melody in this section is na 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 na. The harmony is doing this. Grass is waving underwater. Odd note choices. They almost don't work, but they do. And then the harmony evens out on This Is How I Would Want to Go. It's much more conventional at that point. This is how I would want to go. Oh, that's such a nice harmony too. I'm sure the piano correspondent has touched on this, but XTC as a band always uses chords to their fullest potential. They play with these eccentric and adventurous voicings and just design these delicious treats and surprises for the listener. And I would say that this is probably one of their more conventional songs, but even here, there are Easter eggs everywhere. I also really love the lyric, "Please don't pull me out," because as a listener, they've curated these notes in such a way that you feel like you are experiencing this cauldron of bliss, and you don't really want to be pulled out either. The song is very simply structured. We have a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus, but it doesn't feel repetitive because when we do our second loop of verse and chorus, we add some new instruments, we add some new vocals, and consequently, as listeners, we are not bored. In this next part of the verse, there's a line, insect buzzing Buddhist droning? Insect bombing, insect... I'm gonna get this. Insect bomber Buddhist droning. And they introduce this buzzing droning instrument at that point. Again, I'm not sure what it is. I'm gonna try once more. No hints. I don't know. It sounds like tempura, maybe. It sounds like that bit in Getting Better. It has that same effect, that same understated buzz. As we mentioned, there are new harmonies at the verse. We also have new harmonies at this next chorus here. Actually, not so much harmonies, more of a counter melody, but it's a really nice one. The counter melody descends the first time, and ascends the second time. Near the end of the song is one of my favorite XTC drum fills. God, that's good. And then, a la Sgt. Pepper's, because, as I hope is obvious by this point, these guys were huge Beatles fans, we blend straight into track 2. What a great way to open an album. That feeling of sinking into something warm and comfortable, and that's kind of what the rest of the album feels like. Yeah, there are songs that are dark, there are songs about death, there are songs about heartbreak, but this song makes you feel like this band is going to carry you through life, but you're going to be safe the whole time. It's going to be uncomfortable at points in the album, but you're going to be safe, and it's going to be okay. Todd was bang on the money with the sequencing, man. After I finished doing the Sounds Like This portion, I thought, God, I could do an episode on every single song on this album. I'm not going to do it in one go because... I want to reserve my energy. I want to give each track the love it deserves. But I highly recommend that you go and listen to the entire thing, the whole album, front to end, so that you can bask in the glory of that sequencing that Todd Rundgren informed the band that they would be adhering to. So there we have it. This is an album that is of a very, very high caliber in terms of the performance, the arrangements, the production choices, the general songcraft. There are no skips for me on this one. I don't think there's a single song on this album that I don't have a very high regard for, but also it occupies an incredibly special place in my heart because of the reprieve that it granted me when I was going through my first very difficult time as a young person. So, thank you so much, XTC, Skylarking, Todd Rundgren. Really appreciate your work. That's it from me. If you enjoyed this episode or you would like to support any of the weird things I do, I'll leave a link in the description to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you are most welcome to make a donation. If you wish, no pressure, my friends. Thank you so much to everybody who has made a donation or signed on as a member. I really appreciate you. Really, truly, very much. And I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. I hope everybody else has also enjoyed this episode, but as you sort of sponsored it, thank you. And I hope it was to your liking. If you're curious about what any of my original music sounds like, I'll leave a link in the description to that as well. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend!